Hello and welcome to our journey through Biblical Greek. Today we are looking at the future tense, and we are looking at the future tense in the indicative mood. But let's look at what we've looked at so far. When we're looking at the verbs in chapter 8, we said that Greek divides tenses in two ways. You have past time and present time and future. You have tenses that belong to the past time and tenses that belong in the present and in the future. And we say that past tenses are called secondary tenses because they're using secondary endings, and we said present and future tenses are called primary tenses because they use primary endings. And so we looked at the present tense under the primary endings, and we said that the present tense uses primary endings, and there are two tenses that use primary endings. We have the present tense and the future tense. And today we're looking at the future tense. Afterwards, we looked at two paradigms. We looked at the present active indicative paradigm. And this paradigm is very important because this is where the future tense is built from. And we looked at how to know it faster by using the song, O-S-A, Omen ete usin. So these are active endings. And we moved on to look at the present, middle, or passive endings. And we said that the middle and passive voices have the same endings in the present tense. And so if you know the middle paradigm, it's the same paradigm for the passive voice. And so it was very easy for us to learn it and to know it. Again, we looked at how to know it better by using the song, and we used the word luo to learn the song. Luo mai, lue tai, luo metha, lueste, luon. So if you want to know the paradigms easily, know the songs and they'll help you to learn the paradigm faster. Again, this is where the future tense is built from, because if you remember, we said that all primary tenses have the same endings. And so the present tense and the future tense have the same endings. They are built from the same endings. And so if you know the paradigm for the present tense, you already know the paradigm for the future tense, because they are built from the primary endings. And so it's very important for you to get conversant with the endings, because they will help you to appreciate the future tense. In chapter 10, we are looking at the future tense in the indicative mode. So let's look at the future tense in the indicative mode. Now, if you remember, we said that every word, every verb has the stem and the ending. Or in other words, every verb has the root and the ending. And so every Greek verb comes from a root, which is the most basic form that carries meaning. The root is what carries meaning, but the ending that you attach to the root tells you who is performing the action. And so it's from that root where tenses are built from, where stem tenses are built from. So the root is the same. From the same root, that's where the tenses are being built from. You have the present tense coming from the same root. You have the future tense coming from the same root. And you have the aorist tense coming from the same root. So think of the root like the trunk of a tree, and the tenses as the branches used in different ways. You have the same trunk, but different branches. You have the same verbal root, but different tenses. Let's look at an example. You have the same root, which is lu, and lu means to loose or to untie. But from the same root, you have different tenses that are being built. You have the present tense, luo, which means I loose. You have the future tense, luso, which means I will loose. And you have the past tense, aorist tense, elusa, which means I have loosed. So you have the same root, but different tenses. And this is what we mean. Every verb has the same root, and tenses are going to be built from that root by adding their own endings. And notice that the future adds sigma to form its verbs. Sigma is added to the stem to form the future verbs. And notice in the aorist tense, the aorist also adds e argument at the beginning of the word to show that the action happened in the past. So the e argument is telling you that this action happened in the past, but we're going to look at this in the future. The aorist tense is going to be looked at in Greek 2. In Greek 1, we will only focus on the present tense and the future tense. Or in short, we'll focus on the primary tenses. So the big idea here is that a verb has the same root, like lu in this case. So tenses are built from the root or the stem by adding their own tense markers or verbal endings. So this is how Greek tenses are built, by using the same root and adding their own verbal endings or tense markers. So let's start by looking at the future active indicative. The future active indicative. Remember, every tense has about 3 voices. There's active voice, middle voice, and passive voice. So let's start by looking at how the future builds its active voice. So to build a verb in the active voice, you get the stem of a word and attach tense markers plus primary active personal endings. These are personal endings that we have looked at when we're looking at the present tense. Let's use the word luo for example. If you want to build lu in the future tense, in the active voice, you get the tense stem, which is lu, and attach the tense marker, which is sigma. Sigma is what we call a tense marker. It shows that the word you're looking at is in the future tense. When you see the letter sigma after the stem, you should know that that word you're looking at is in the future tense. So in the future active indicative, verbs are built by following this pattern. Number one, you get the stem. On the stem, you attach sigma, which is a tense marker, an identity of the future tense. And to sigma, you attach the primary active personal endings, the same endings that the present tense was using. When you add all these three items, you are forming the future active indicative. For example, you have lu, which is a tense stem, and you attach sigma, which is an identity of the future tense, and then you attach omen, which is an ending, a primary active ending. These are the same endings that we looked at when we're looking at the present tense. You have osa, omen ete usin. That omen is a primary ending. And these are the same endings that the future tense is using. So when you want to build the future tense, you get the stem, add the identity which is sigma, and you attach the primary endings there. So you have lu plus sigma plus omen, which gives you lusomen. In the present tense, it was luomen. In the future tense, it's lusomen. There's that sigma there. And that sigma is very important because it's the identity of the future tense. That sigma is what tells you that that word you're looking at is in the future tense. So let's look at some examples on how the future tense builds its verbs from the present tense, or the changes that happen to a verb when it changes from the present tense to a future tense. So these are verbs in the present tense, and these are verbs in the future tense. The first example there is akuo. To take it into the present tense, you add the primary ending omega, which makes it akuo, and akuo means I hear. But to take akuo into the future, you add the tense marker, which is a sigma. You add sigma before omega to make it akuso. And akuso means I will hear. Akuo means I hear. Akuso means I will hear. Another example is blep, the root or the stem blep. In the present tense is blepo, blepo, which means I see. Blep means to see. Blepo means I see. But in the future tense, you add that sigma there, and the word becomes blepso, blepso. Again, there's that change that has happened there, and we're going to look at the changes that happen to some words when sigma is added. But the most important thing is that there's that sigma that is added to make the word blepso, blepso. But there are things to notice here. Number one, the root remains the same, but the endings are the ones that are changing. To carry a word from the present tense into the future tense, you change the endings but maintain the root. Number two, you add the tense marker, which is sigma, before the primary endings are added, because sigma is an indicator that the word you're looking at is in the future tense. Let's look at the paradigm for the future tense, the paradigm for the future active indicative, so that we can see clearly what we're saying here. So here is the paradigm for the future active indicative using the word luo. Luo, which means I lose. As we said it, you get the stem. The stem is maintained, and you can see there the stem is lu, which is maintained throughout. But we say to create the future tense, you get the stem and attach sigma, the one that has been highlighted there, to the stem. After attaching sigma, you attach the primary endings, and you can see that those endings are the same endings that we're mastering under the present tense, because the present tense and the future tense have the same endings. The only difference is this, that the future tense adds sigma right before you add the primary endings. So in the first person singular, you have the word luso. In the present tense, it was luo, which meant I lose. In the future tense, it's luso, with that sigma added there, which means I will lose. In second person singular, you have the word luseis. In the present tense, it was lues, which meant you lose. But now that is the future tense, it's luseis, which means you lose. In the third person singular, you have lusei. In the present tense, it was luei, which meant he or she or it loses. But now that it's in the future tense, with that sigma added, it's lusei, which means he or she or it will lose. In the first person plural, you have the word lusomen. In the present tense, it was luomen, which meant we lose. But now that it's in the future tense, it's lusomen, which means we will lose. In the second person plural, you have lusete, which was luete in the present tense. Now that it's in the future tense, it's lusete and it means you will lose. In the third person plural, you have lususin, which was lusin in the present tense. But now in the future tense, it's lususin, which means they will lose. So you have luso, which means I will lose, luseis, which means you will lose, lusei, which means he or she or it will lose, lusomen, which means we will lose, these are plurals now, lusete, which means you will lose, lususin, which means they will lose. Again, you can see that it's the same form. The only difference is the sigma that has been added. The endings are the same. You have osa, omen ete usin. And these are the endings that you're mastering under the present tense. The only difference is that you add sigma right in between the stem and the primary ending. That is how you form the future active indicative. So again, the future tense uses the same primary endings as the present tense. So once you master the present tense endings, you are mastering the future tense endings because they're sharing the same primary endings. Let's look at the future middle indicative, how to form words in the middle voice. Again, the procedure is the same. You get the stem and you add the tense marker, which is sigma, and you attach the primary middle endings. For the active voice, we said you attach the primary active endings, but for the middle, you attach the primary middle endings. And again, these are the same middle endings for the present tense that are being used to form the future middle voice. Again, we're using the same word luo. So you have the stem lu, and we attach sigma, which is the tense marker, and we attach the middle ending, for example, omai. So you have lusomai. Omai is a middle ending, sigma is a tense marker, lu is a stem. So the procedure is the same, only that for the middle voice, you use middle primary endings. So again, if you master the primary endings, the same endings that the present tense was using in the middle voice, you already know the future middle indicative because these two are using the same endings. The only difference again is the sigma that has been added. So let's look at the paradigm for the middle voice. Under the singular, you have lusomai, which means I will lose myself. Remember, the middle voice shows an action that the subject is doing for themselves or on behalf of themselves. So you have lusomai, which means I will lose myself. You have lusei, which means you will lose yourself. You have lusetai, which means he or she or it will lose himself. Under the plural, you have lusometha, which means we will lose ourselves. You have luseste, which means you will lose yourselves. You have lusontai, which means they will lose themselves. So you have lusomai, lusei, lusetai, lusometha, luseste, lusontai. Again, when you look at the paradigm, the only difference between the future middle and the present middle is a sigma that has been added, because sigma is an identity of the future tense. So when you look at the endings are the same. When you look at the stem is the same. The only difference is that sigma that has been added. So this is a paradigm for the future middle indicative or the future middle voice. Again, I want to repeat on translation. How you translate it is you add that reflexive voice. Myself, yourself, himself, ourselves, yourselves, themselves, because the speaker is doing the action to themselves on behalf of themselves. Let's look at the future passive indicative, how to form passive voice in the future tense. The procedure is the same again. You get the stem. Now the future passive is slightly different because it does not only add the sigma, it adds theta, eta, sigma. This is an identity of the future passive indicative. But the endings that you attach are the same as the middle endings because the passive and middle endings share the endings. For example, we have the same stem lu. Instead of adding sigma now, in the future active and future middle voice, we're adding sigma as a tense marker. But when you're in the passive voice, our tense marker is theta, eta, sigma. So to the stem lu, you attach theta, eta, sigma. and then you attach the primary middle endings or primary passive endings because they're basically the same. So you have lu plus theis plus omai, which makes luthesomai, luthesomai. And that is how future passive indicative voice is formed. Again, I want to repeat that the future passive is different because it does not add sigma, it adds theta, eta, sigma. That is its identity. That is what makes it different from the active voice as well as the middle voice. So let's look at this paradigm. Again, we said the stem is the same, the root is the same, but to the root you add theta, eta, sigma. As you can see, there's that theta, eta, sigma that has been repeated. You have omai, etai, ometha, este, ontai, and these are the same middle endings that we used under the present tense. These are the same endings that we're using on the future tense. The only difference in the future passive voice is this, that we're adding the theta, eta, sigma. For example, we have luthesomai, which means I will be loosed. Again, notice the translation. If you remember, we said that in the passive voice, the speaker is receiving an action. The action is being done to the speaker or on the speaker. The speaker is not the one doing the action, but the speaker is receiving the action. So the translation is, I will be loosed. Instead of saying I will loose, it's I will be loosed because the speaker is receiving the action. So we have the word luthesomai, which means I will be loosed. We have luthesei, which means you'll be loosed. We have luthesetai, which means he or she or it will be loosed. We have luthesometha, which means will be loosed. We have lutheseste, which means you'll be loosed. We have luthesontai, which means they will be loosed. So there's that theta, eta, sigma that has been repeated. That is the identity of the future passive indicative. So when you see theta, eta, sigma, that shows you that the word you're looking at is in the future tense but passive voice. When you only see sigma, that is an identity of the active voice and the middle voice. So under the passive voice, you have I will be loosed, you will be loosed, he or she or it will be loosed, will be loosed, you will be loosed, they will be loosed. So this is the paradigm for the future passive indicative. Before we close, let's look at the changes that happen when sigma is added to some words in the future tense. And to explain these changes, we use what we call the square of stops. So what is the square of stops? The square of stops shows how Greek consonants change when they are combined to the letter sigma. When sigma is combined to some words or some consonants, there are changes that happen to those words. So when a verb stem ending in certain consonants meets sigma, which is a tense marker in the future tense, Greek changes the sound to make it smoother. So these changes are explained by what we call the square of stops. And the changes are in three categories. So we have velars, labials, and dentals. They are what we call velar. Velar changes are changes that are formed when sigma meets letters like kappa, gamma, or chi. These sounds are formed at the back of the tongue, kappa, gamma, or chi. So when sigma is added to any of these three letters, instead of showing sigma, it will show xi. So the rule is that when sigma adds itself to kappa, gamma, or chi, the word will not be kappa and sigma or gamma and sigma or chi and sigma. The final result will show xi, because sigma does not accommodate kappa, gamma, or chi. It will change it to xi. Second category is what we call labials. And labials are letters that are formed with the lips. For example, pi, beta, or phi. Under the labials, when sigma adds itself to pi, beta, or phi, the final result will be psi. The last category are dentals. Dentals are letters that are formed with the teeth. For example, tau, delta, or theta. So the rule under the dentals is this, that when sigma joins itself to tau, delta, or theta, the final result will be sigma. The dentals will be dropped and the final result, the word will show sigma. Let's look at some examples to explain this. For example, under the velars, we said that when sigma joins kappa, gamma, or chi, the final result will be xi. For example, we have the word echo in the present tense. When echo goes into the future tense, it will be exo. Instead of it being exo, that is epsilon, chi, sigma, omega, it will be exo epsilon xi omega, which will mean I will have. Again, we have another word, ago, that will go into axo in the future tense. Because when sigma joins gamma, it will not be gamma sigma, it will be xi that will be formed, which means I will lead or I will bring. Under the labios, you have blepo, that will be blepso in the future tense. Blepo is present tense. In the future tense, it's going to be blepso. That psi is as a result of pi combining with sigma. So psi will be the result. Another word under the labios, we have grapho. And the final result in the future tense will be grapso. When you combine phi with sigma, psi will be the final result. And grapso means I will write. Last example is on the dentals. We said when sigma joins tau, delta, or theta, the dentals are going to be dropped and sigma will be maintained, as in the case for peitho in the present tense. In the future tense, it will be peiso, which means I will persuade. Peitho means I persuade. Peiso in the future tense means I will persuade. So the theta has been dropped, maintaining sigma there. So these are some of the changes, the few changes that happens when sigma joins itself to some consonants. But the root is the same, only the endings will be different. So it's very important to know the changes that happen on the square of stops, the changes that happen when sigma is added to some words in the future tense. These are some of the few changes that will happen. Let's summarize what we've looked at so far. Number one, we have seen that in the future tense has its own identity, and that is sigma. The future tense adds a future marker, a future tense marker, which is sigma, to indicate to the reader that the word you're looking at is in the future tense. And on the future active voice, we said that when you're forming the future active voice, you get the stem and you add the future marker, which is sigma, and you begin attaching the future primary active endings. For example, you have the word luso, luseis, lusei. You have the stem plus sigma plus primary active ending. And under the middle voice, under the future middle voice, we saw the same procedure. You have the stem plus sigma, only that in the middle voice, you add primary middle endings. For example, you have lusomai, lusei. You have the stem is the same. You attach sigma, which is an identity of the future tense, plus primary middle endings to form the middle voice. But under the passive voice, we said that the stem is the same, but instead of adding sigma, you add theta, eta, sigma, an identity of the passive voice in the future tense. Then you add primary middle passive endings, because the middle endings are the same as the passive endings. For example, you have the word lothesomai, that is in the passive voice. That theta, eta, sigma is indicating to the reader that the word you're looking at is in the future tense, but under the passive voice. So this is how the future tense is formed. Let's look at examples on how to translate the future tense. Let's begin with these two here. The first one is lusometha. Lusometha. Again, to translate, you need to know the paradigm. And so once you have mastered the future tense paradigm, you will know that lusometha is coming from the middle voice. That ending ometha is coming from the first person plural. And the translation is, we will lose ourselves. We will lose ourselves. So the paradigm will be able to give you that information. And the second example is luthesometha. Luthesometha. And because of that theta, eta, sigma, we know that this is coming from the passive voice, from the future passive voice. And the translation is, we will be loosed. We will be loosed. Again, because of that ometha, the ending is coming from the first person plural, which means we. So it's we will be loosed. Will be loosed. What is important to notice here is that you cannot translate minus knowing the paradigm. So it's very important to know the paradigm for the future tense, the same way we master the paradigm for the present tense. Let's look at an example of a passage, how to translate a passage. We have that passage there, Pantes anthropoi pistiousosin eis auton. Pantes anthropoi pistiousosin eis auton. Pantes means all. Anthropoi is coming from the word anthropos, which means man. But because of that ending there, that noun is in the plural, is in masculine plural. So instead of saying man, you say men. Pistuosin is coming from the word pisteuo, which means I believe. But because of that sigma there, we know that the word we are looking at is in the future tense. Again, because of that ending, usin, we know that that ending is in the third person plural. So the translation is they. So instead of saying, I will believe, it will be, they will believe. They will believe. And then we have the word eis. Eis means into. And then we have the personal pronoun, auton. Auton means him. So we have pantes, or, anthropoi, men, pistuosin, they will believe, eis, in, auton, him. So the translation is, all men will believe in him. All men will believe in him. And this is how you translate the future tense, by knowing the paradigm. And you can see that translation gathers all information on the paradigms that you have learned. Paradigms on the nouns, paradigms on the pronouns, paradigm on the definite article, and paradigm on the verbs. So it's very important to know the paradigms, because without the paradigms, you cannot translate phrases. So this is how you translate the future tense. Before we close, let's look at chapter 10 vocabulary. Let's look at some words that we find in chapter 10. We have the word thanatos, and thanatos means death. And then we have the word krino. Krino means I judge. And then we have the word meno. Meno means I remain. And then we have the word monos. Monos means only. And this is where we get the word monogenes. That's the word that is found in John 3 verse 16, where it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. That phrase, only begotten son, is coming from the word monogenes, meaning unique or only son, because that is coming from the word monos, and monos means alone or only. So monos means only or alone. And then we have the word nun. Nun means now. And then we have the word ude. Ude means and not. Ude means and not. And then we have the word exousia. Exousia means authority or power. It means authority or power. And this power is delegated power. This is delegated power. So exousia means authority or power. And then we have the word euangelion. Euangelion means gospel or good news. It means gospel or good news. And then we have the word thalassa. Thalassa means sea. It means sea. Then we have the word Ioannes. Ioannes means John. Then we have the word parabole. Parabole means parable. Parabole means parable. And then we have the word entole. Entole means command or commandment. Entole means command or commandment. And then we have sax. Sax means flesh. It means flesh or body. Sax means flesh or body. And then we have the word teknon. Teknon means child. Teknon means child. And then we have the word metea. Metea means mother. This is where we get the word maternity. Metea means mother, from the Greek word mother, metea. Metea means mother. And then we have the word pater. And this is where we get the word paternity test. Paternity test, from the Greek word pater, because pater means father. So metea means mother, pater means father. And then we have the word anea. Anea means man, or it means husband. Man or husband. And then we have the word arche. Arche means beginning. Arche means beginning. And then we have the word tis. Tis. Tis means who or what. Tis means who or what. And lastly is the word doulos. Now I've repeated this word because I want to explain it. Doulos. Doulos means slave or servant. Doulos means slave or servant. And you find this a lot in the writings of Paul, because doulos means one owned by another. One owned by another. It emphasizes submission and not employment. In the writings of Paul, especially in the writings of Paul, doulos, the word doulos emphasizes submission, not employment. This is a person who makes himself a slave to another person. And when Paul introduces himself, he says, Paul, the doulos of Christ. And that means Paul, the self-made slave to Christ. Because doulos in the Bible means a self-made servant or slave. That emphasizes submission and not employment. You are not employed, but you submit to another person to become a slave. And that is very important in the Bible. So doulos means a slave or a servant. This marks the end of chapter 10. Practice, practice, practice. God bless.